So yes, this is the first, actually, DEF CON talk on what's technically an official DEF CON stage about Nix. So yeah, just to give some intro, give it up for Nix.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to talk about the Nix ecosystem. This talk's called Rebuild the World because that's kind of what Nix is trying to do. Nix is, well, it's a lot of things to a lot of people. Let's start with intro. So I'm Morgan Jones.
Hi, I'm Thomas Berekny. You might know me as Tom Berek. I've been doing Nix stuff for more than a decade now, and probably have touched a lot of different portions of the ecosystem. And my main efforts these days have been to promote the use of Nix throughout the world, industry, companies, organizations, people, and just trying to spread the good word.
Hi, I'm Fareed. I don't professionally work on Nix, but I've used it not quite a decade, but I don't know, over half a decade at least. And I'm an active contributor, and I'm a pretty vocal, critic and positive about Nix after having used it for so long. Yeah.
And yeah, just a bit about myself. So I'm Morgan Jones. I'm a Nixpkgs committer, and I've been working at Viasat on reproducible builds of various bits of software with Nix. And I've been using it for the past, I think, 8 or so years at this point. And yeah, I got into it for like a Raspberry Pi project in college, and it's kind of just completely changed how I deploy Linux. So glad to have these guys on stage. All right, so let's kind of talk. Let's talk, I guess, so Nix is an ecosystem that has like 3 major components. There's Nix, the like package manager and language. There's Nixpkgs, the package set. And there's NixOS, the operating system. Can you guys kind of talk about like what's the difference? Why should people care that there is a difference?
Yeah. So the way to think about it is actually a little bit backwards than you might have in other like ecosystems or distros. In this ecosystem, Nix, the package manager, essentially came first. And the original idea was for it to be a package manager or a software distribution mechanism that would work anywhere. It would work on other distros. It would work on, whatever like kernel or Unix flavor you were on, and you would have a system that could reliably distribute software and move it around. Well, that came with some requirements. We had to actually like rebuild software. We had to have a way to like manage all these build recipes, right? So that's where Nixpkgs came from. And then someone had this great idea of like, well, wait a minute. If I have a package manager, what if I make an OS? So then that's where like the OS as a distro came from, which was good. A lot of people come to the ecosystem through the OS, but understanding that it originally came from that like package manager that can kind of coexist anywhere is important to keep in mind because it also highlights some of the big benefits you get out of it.
Sorry, and the question was like, which of the 3 do you think ultimately is the most important too, or
more like kind of what's the notable things that are important about each?
Yeah, like the most important thing to me ultimately, and I touched on this on a talk earlier, is that there's a graph. I mean, you get this point sometimes where you learn Nix, where you come away with there's a class of problems everyone's facing that you don't have today. And I think we use the word packages, Nix, language, operating. They're all like fancy words, and you could say just files. Like there is still this fundamental problem where you cannot update a machine you can't deploy more than 1 file atomically prior to Nix. That is like one primitive you have. So it's like these series of primitives, and from that you get all this cool stuff. And I think whichever avenue leads you to those primitives, whether it's the language, the operating system, the package manager, it is just your inroad into this ecosystem that's going to unlock tons of value. And it really doesn't matter which way you come in.
So why not just use Docker?
Oh, you're giving me eyes like you want to go.
Sure.
I have also a lot, but you can go first. I have so much pain here.
So in the ecosystem, Docker represents this point of, well, what if we do a bunch of things that make it easier for you to deploy software, but we have zero opinion about packaging. That's roughly kind of like the approach Docker took, notably represented as like their Docker file. Right? In your Docker file, you either like copy in the binary you need directly, or you piggyback on top of some other existing ecosystem in order to like build up the environment that you need. So they took a very like hands-off, agnostic approach. We're not going to solve the packaging problem. What ended up happening is then, I mean, that works. It works pretty well. It works very well as a leaf mechanism. And it created an amazing ecosystem of orchestration, like all the Kubernetes, the cloud native ecosystem. Like it's really good at like large scale runtime orchestration, but they have still dodged the problem of packaging. And effectively enough that it actually right now we have a less interest, less expertise of how to properly do packaging. Because what's the point of packaging, right? It's to make software reusable in more places. That's why you package something. Otherwise, what would be the point? And let's say you like deploy a library of some kind or an SDK. Well, if you need your library or SDK used by other people, if you give it to them as a container, that's great and all. But what if that person now has to combine two different libraries or two different ecosystems, two different SDKs, or three or four, right? Because you're gluing together a larger system and these things have to work together. You can't say, hey, from 3 different containers, smush them all together and now make them all work. You're very likely going to have problems because those aren't packages. That's something that Nix actually solves very well, which is say, I can safely squish together 3 different distributions or 3 different software libraries or 3 different SDKs and have them safely be composed together and now glue together the larger system that I want. So it's not really why not use Docker? I mean, use Docker. It's great. It's awesome for orchestration, for final artifact delivery. There's all sorts of like support for it. But it's not a packaging system. It's not a package ecosystem. It's not a configuration management ecosystem, right? It's an artifact distribution mechanism. So go ahead and use that. And also Nix works well with it. You can use Nix to build your Docker containers. Those CI containers get, spit out the other end, use them, integrate with them. So I kind of don't see it as Nix versus Docker. I see it as Nix and Docker.
But also, please don't ask me to use a Docker like a Docker image to develop in your project. Like the amount of complexity it adds, it's like you have to be in, there's a PID namespace, a mount namespace, a network namespace. I want to debug the application. Oh, wait, okay. Like remember the port mapping. There's a NAT bridge. Maybe open it up on the host port. It's like Nix boils that all away. I mean, people take on that complexity because they're trying to solve what sort of Nix gives you from the bottom up rather from the top down. And one of the largest takeaways, I think, is the conflation between immutability and reproduction. So Docker's great in that it's immutable. The final image is like a golden image you can ship around and you get some amount of... There's reproduction in the fact that you're shipping a final product, like the master CD. But I'm sure many of us have had that experience where you go to change something in it and it breaks. And nothing about that experience is reproducible. And there's like tons of blog posts on like, well, this is how you make it reproducible. And you got to bolt on additional patterns. Like, Nix is a little more complexity up front, and then it gives you the railguards so you don't need to do any of that. So I think that's like, why not? If I wanted to give you the sales pitch on why not use Docker from that angle, that would be the case.
Actually, I have another piece, which was to switch the game around and using Nix inside of images. We actually see that if you look at the Docker debugger that Docker put out, it's using Nix inside the hood. We're seeing a lot of use cases where in limited runtime environments, people need a way to bring in additional packages to have users and clients customize them, but in a way that's not going to destroy whatever the image itself is already doing. Well, what's a great way to bring in new packages to an ecosystem in a non-conflicting manner? That was the original use case for Nix. So we're seeing that example being used as well, which is to start using it inside of containerization, virtualization, lightweight virtual machines, and so forth.
One of the kind of things that there was kind of a joke about Docker that someone made a while ago that was like, basically it was just Vim packaged with Docker. Like the entire Docker image was just, to run Vim. And well, with Nix, you can kind of do the same package, granular, like containers, but not really containers. But, you don't have all the overhead of running a whole Linux system. On a related note, so let's talk kind of like SBOM stuff. So Nix, if we're rebuilding everything from the ground up and we don't have to deal with this kind of top-down problem of scanning images for, what software they're using and all that stuff, if we actually have all the dependencies from the bottom up, how does Nix kind of change the game for knowing what goes into your software?
I think having a view of your graph and a reliable way to understand all your dependencies is game-changing from many angles, like knowing the provenance of the code down to the commit of every particular piece of code as well as patches is a game changer. And I think people attach provenance to like versions. When I see someone, I helped a lot of friends, coworkers debug, and they're like, you run -- version on a command. That feels, and it's like, incredibly granular to them. But a major, even a minor version and semantic versioning, it's like, what is the commit at that level? And what is the commit at that level and what dependency did it take on? That level of specificity is huge in understanding, like, are you vulnerable to certain CVEs? The provenance and supply chain trust for everything you're running. And those are the primitives you take to build a secure enclave for what you're running your machine on. So you have a lot of reproduction and you know what you're running.
But so I'd actually say that specificity is actually a dual-edged sword. It actually causes problems because that specificity is not the level that people who are managing, tracking for security vulnerabilities, they don't track to that level of specificity. They don't care about like, hey, are you using Nix and what commit is this and what's this transitive that? Like, one, we're not big enough yet for that, but also like they're not doing that for other ecosystems either. They are doing it at that like fuzzy level. So I think the ultimate outcome we're probably going to get to is like we have really good SBOMs today, right? We have them by construction. We actually start with making an SBOM super, and then we use it to build our software, right? Rather than the other way around. We don't just build the software and then go try to extract it all out. And, we actually started with that. So 20 years ago, we didn't call them SBOMs, we called them derivations. But, bad naming aside, that means we're correct by construction. Next thing we got to do now is actually weaken it. We now have to be able to create an SBOM that includes that ultra precise, identifier. But we also need to have a really fuzzy identifier, the sort of identifier that, the NVD folks, MITRE, and all the security vendors are going to use, which is going to be something different, something like a CPE, something like a package URL. And for the most part, we could probably get that out of Nix packages today. One of my call to actions I'd like to propose is let's fix up some of the places where it's not quite right. Add those fixes, and then now we can start generating not just hyper accurate SBOMs, but also usable ones that now could be given to any security vendor that will gladly ingest it, take the responsibility off of them for scanning and heuristics and managing the images and containers. They just throw an SBOM at them, they'll send you alerts and updates and vulnerability information and all that stuff. And now you have really easy integration into a lot of the corporate environment, a lot of the organizational environments. Because now you have both the precision and integration.
But there's an opportunity to scan the source. And I think the gap here is oftentimes you want that coarse fidelity because nobody builds packages rarely from source in their pristine format. Every distribution adds some sort of patches to make it work with other package sets in that ecosystem. So you need having the ability to go to source and then do the analysis is incredibly factual. Are you vulnerable to this CV because they might have already patched that CV but kept the version number. And the Nix package, the Nix SBOM lets you get the source exactly for every single package you've installed, and one could follow and then audit the source and see if you're vulnerable. But I think like that's such a leap from where we are today that we're not there yet. But because a few other technologies offer that capability.
So what I'm hearing is that we need to add a static analysis phase to standard env.
Well, maybe not quite that, but you have to be able to do like all of these things. You have to be able to expose the power to go like dig into source. You have to expose the power to like understand the full graph. You have to be able to make this integratable. So while in theory, from an academic perspective, we're perfectly positioned and have these like amazing SBOMs ready to go, the ecosystem needs a little bit more work to really like make them shine, right? We can't actually expose that power today as easily. So that needs a little bit of tooling. It needs integration. It needs like ecosystem improvements. But I mean, the potential's there. It just has to be realized.
Yeah, and if any of you like have done source level analysis, you might be thinking, okay, I have this on our Linux distribution, Debian, Fedora, whatever base distribution. It's like somewhat true you do, but it's because there's a single package set and you can't really deviate from that. So they've solved that by really clamping down on the compatibility matrix story. They're saying these are the package sets you get only at these versions. And you can work back to this golden package set and do all the analysis you'd like. Nix says you kind of get that, and you can go off the rails and do whatever you want and still follow that chain of trust. So I think that's an important caveat. It's like, one way to solve this, which we've done historically in the past, is just limit the expressiveness that developers can do. And Nix says, no, go ham. Go install any package you want, any version you want, any commit you want. And we'll like give you the tool set to still go to source if you need.
Speaking of trust a little bit, can you guys talk about maybe like a couple things about Nix's trust model? Like if you're downloading packages from somewhere and substituting them, as the term kind of is, what are you trusting? What are you kind of assuming about where you're grabbing the packages and what packages they are?
Yeah, so if you're just going through like a initial user, the way that trust model works is, we have the Nix Foundation runs a build farm, organizes, orchestrates it with something called Hydra, and they will build all the packages get built from source, and they get signed and they get put into a cache. That cache is a cache in the sense that it's an optimization. You could go rebuild all those yourself. You just turn off the substitutor and you will essentially rebuild the world. It'll take a few hours depending on what it is that you're building, because you are really going to go like all the way down to Bootstrap and start like rebuilding everything. That's a great way to audit. That means auditability is right at your fingertips. But for practicality, you want to substitute. And by default, what you're trusting is that public key that is then signing everything that the build farm produces. If you work at a company, let's say you have a policy that you also have to rebuild from source. Cool. You rebuild everything from source the way I just mentioned. You sign it with your own public key, public-private key pair, and then that's what you trust. And as long as the substitutor serves those up correctly with the signatures, then now you have assurance that you're getting your software from something that complies with your policy or whatever your thing happens to be.
And Nix takes a lot of extra steps to be able to rebuild the world. Maybe not as much as like foundations like the Software Heritage Foundation, but rebuilding from source, just because you have the recipe set to do it, doesn't mean it still exists out there in the world. So that you have to take a lot of actions in place to cache sources, patches, works of art, so that you can go years later and rebuild things from source. So that is the promise Nix gives you only if the source exists. There's work streams by the Software Heritage Foundation where they're like, kind of like the Internet Archive, archiving the world alongside Nix there, and they're using Nix here to do that. The Nix organization as well caches certain sources for you so that you can rebuild the world when necessary.
Yeah, there's there's like software bundles that have actually disappeared off the internet, and they still exist in the Nix cache because they were part of some build, 10 years ago. And that's where like they actually found one that actually matches the correct hashes that got locked in some of their lock file.
I'd add to that too. There's an honorable mention for some people doing basically builds of old ham radio packages. I'm pretty sure that's Matthew Crowan's project. They're rebuilding just this ancient software where the amateur radio developer in question has either passed away or is moving on and doing something else, and the software is effectively abandoned. But they've gotten it working in like wine in a completely reproducible way, which is kind of amazing. Cool. So a little bit less kind of enterprise than SBOMs. How did you guys get started with Nix, out of curiosity?
I'll start. Okay. It took a lot of attempts. A lot of attempts. So if you're listening to what we're saying, or you've attended any other Nix talks, or you've tried to learn Nix, and it's like way, hitting your head, and it's in a poor state of affairs. The documentation, believe me, it was a lot worse 5 years or 7 years ago, and it was incredibly hard to learn, but the appeal was there. So if you're the type that you've hit all the same frustrations we might be talking about in terms of reproduction, building software reliably, I take part in a lot of open source projects, and I was just frustrated I couldn't get my tool set reliably every time I'd revisit my project months later. I was like, I need to just spend the time here to learn it, and I did. And I think the strong benefit of Nix is it's got an incredibly vibrant community, and other people with that shared pain of it took me a long time to learn this. So they're willing to white glove you and like hand feed you that pill so that you will learn it. And I think that's okay. Some things can have a really easy on-ramp to learn, and some things need a little like, let me pill you in and get it, because it's such a different shift. It's a seismic shift from how we build software today. So it deviates from, you cannot lean on your decades of experience of like how software is built previously. So that seismic shift, sometimes you need that extra hand, and that's okay. So yeah, it was about like 10 years ago, I was working for a company that got acquired by Google, and I was just frustrated with like the onboarding experience was, here's a bunch of scripts in a README, go run them. And the likelihood, if every script is like 90% success rate, by the time you're like 10 scripts in, it's like a 30% success rate that you're going to finish that workflow. So I was like, there has to be a better way. And I had to, we had Mac and Linux developers. So you're like auditing what the scene is. And really fast, even about 2015, 16, Nix emerged as like a clear competitor that offered a solution. And that began my journey of curating a development experience for other developers at this company.
I came to it, I came from the Arch world, and I'm like, hey, I configured this, I broke my machine a few times, and then I fixed it, and I broke it again a few times. That's the story of how you learn Linux. I also came from the Haskell world, so I was already kind of interested in the functional programming paradigm. And then basically just came across Nix at one point, and then what I discovered were superpowers. I discovered a set of superpowers of being able to move software around, get it working, have it be reliable, have those scripts when they like, hey, even if they fail half the time, at least when they failed, they didn't like pollute something. I can kind of go fix them and then now not have to start over from the beginning. I found ways to distribute software, to build it, to test it. Built hardware in the loop testing that incorporated these sorts of ideas into like the process, and I found myself just to be way, way more productive. I could run circles around, similar developers who were struggling with, my cross-compiling toolchain is installed here, and then I broke my machine after rebuilding my VM. Oh, that SDK is on my other laptop. Like all those problems kind of went away. It took some expertise and time, but at this point I've got Stockholm syndrome and I can't think of another way or a better way. So this is for me the way. And I'm trying to bring these superpowers to the world, make them so they're not superpowers, they're just regular powers that you get. Imagine before the age of version control, right? We solved our problems. It was painful. Today we would call it painful, but now we have a superpower, right? We have version control. Same way, like I have this superpower and I'm just trying to kind of bring it to the world and make it available to all. That's going to require improvements, UX improvements, developer experience improvements. I'm working for a company that's Phlox is trying to make it easier for non-Nix experts to just leverage these superpowers. How do we make it so that we get more adoption, more integration with other like vendors? The whole SBOM conversations is really about integration with security vendors. So that's kind of where I came to it was superpowers, capabilities, things like that.
Well, and we all have these superpowers, but many of us use them to just work on like home labs too, and deploy things like Jellyfin or various like open source softwares that we run in our home labs. I assume you guys use Nix for your home labs. What are you guys running?
Yeah, I think one of the, I know we're all AI crazy. I've been having this thought that, I don't want to shill this company too much, but I've been thinking like GitHub code search has been more monumental to me in the past decade than LLMs, although LLMs, just started, so they might supersede that. You'll see where I'm going with this, is that having a declarative way for my infrastructure and my home labs, I run 2 Pis, my laptop. There's like some crazy superpower that I can browse other people's setups. I was talking to some people here at Nix Vegas. I'm like, oh, you have a cool NeoVim setup. I can just right click, copy like a little snippet and get it exactly on my machine. And browsing everyone's source online and picking what I want, like going shopping and getting, oh, I'd love this and that, where you can't do that when it's an imperative step-by-step line because they're likely forgetting the 50 other steps they had to do before that, install some users or whatever. And nobody really saves their scripts like that anyways because they've run it once and they forget about it. So like code searching and building my infra and my laptop, I've like improved my own developer experience, 2 orders of magnitude, done it reliably, and it's been fun to like rediscover new tools and people's setups that I'd never do before. So yeah, that's my little story.
I used to host, I think, a lot more. I do have like a home lab that was more involved in the past. And sometimes I do more, sometimes less. What I like about tracking all that stuff in a Nix-like way is, well, I can go, oh, I got some new hardware. I'm going to spin up that thing I had a few years ago, and it spins up. Hey, I might update this or update that, and now it's like I never left it. So I don't have to be so worried about like keeping it alive or the care and feeding of it. I can just be like, oh, I'm going to be busy for a little while because of life and family and kids and vacations and who knows what, and I'll like, or the hardware breaks or whatever. Cool. I'll get another piece of hardware, next month, and then hook it all up, run up the same infrastructure that I had already defined declaratively, and I'm back to the races. I've done this a few times and actually sometimes forgot that I had changed the underlying hardware. I had these situations where like, oh, wait a minute, that's right, I changed it, but because the config was just rolled right over, it was seamless. So that's another aspect of it is being able to have things declarative means you're a bit more immune from some of these underlying concerns.
I've got one to add on to that. I updated 3 systems from 24.11 to 25.05 the night before DEF CON started, and they still work. So clearly that counts for something.
Yeah. There's an amount of joy, too, that I think I never had before with systems before NixOS. And that joy is also like running the exact same laptop as someone else. So I bought a framework laptop, and me and my buddy both bought it at the same time, and we decided to run the exact same config. So on my laptop is his user. I'll tell you why he has a user, because we run WireGuard and he can SSH into my laptop. That's also been hilarious. So he's got his user. He has got all his applications. It's a bit, it's a few extra gigs because he's never going to run. He uses, let's say, Brave, and I never run that. I use Chrome. I got so I have his whole profile on my laptop. He's got his whole profile, my profile on his laptop. Sometimes he just SSHs in because he sees me on like our private VPN, and he sends me something on the wall. And anytime he fixes something, I get it. Anytime I fix something, he gets it. And there's just something fun. Like, computers stopped being fun for a little bit. And with NixOS, it's fun because I think what Tom said, you can go explore. If I mess something up and it breaks his computer, he doesn't care. He can roll back or wait a little bit before he accepts my patch, and vice versa. And someone else, I converted a few other people to frameworks, and I'm like, use our config. Start with that. And they're running the exact same thing. And it's kind of like a wild idea. And you kind of see it popping up a little bit now with these, like, I see people like Omarchi is really popular, and it's like you're running these, people want just like an off-the-shelf pre-built solution, and Nix kind of gives you that with a lot stronger guarantees, because you're not running bash scripts to set, well, you are running bash scripts to set it all.
They're managed bash scripts.
They're managed bash scripts.
For your collaborative computing environment.
Yeah.
Nix makes bash scripts immortal.
Yeah. But it's fun. It's like, I wouldn't be here talking to you all about Nix if like I didn't feel joy and like joy. It's like a weird emotion to be feeling again after a while. But it's yeah.
I mean, we've got, by the way, that thing right over there. You guys know what that is. That is our binary cache server, actually, and it has three like Ampere Ultra nodes configured the exact same way, and we've just got it here. Nginx filled over to the other one. But I mean, it's kind of a similar thing. Like, you can configure machines the exact same way and just reproduce that config on another machine. And I mean, yeah, you can do that from like, very small cloud hosts to very large machines like that one.
Yeah. I mean, then once you take that step towards managing like a few things, then you can start, hey, I want to go manage 100 machines. I want to scale up. I want to scale down. You now have a way of doing that in a very controllable, very understandable, very distributable manner. So if you ever need to do like scale up, either, I did this one time for like training purposes, right? We were supporting the training of a new model, run a bunch of data, run a bunch of nodes. Well, I have a way to manage and distribute software to a lot of nodes in a very reliable, dependable way. Ready, set, go. And whether that number was 2 or 200 or 2,000 kind of didn't matter to me. That was just a matter of a big enough credit card to support the cost.
What sort of uses would you guys think that Nix has for like red teams or CTF players, possibly? Like, does this model, do you think, change anything for how people like play cyber games, basically?
So I said in the beginning, right? Nix makes software that can coexist in lots of places. Well, that seems to be a primary need for a lot of people who are doing CTF type work. And maybe you recompile everything not to be at /nix/store. Maybe you put it to be /myfuntools/store, or wherever you want to put it.
/temp/store.
/temp/store. Excellent, right? There's all sorts of good stuff you can do. Well, we got a question.
Why use Kali? You have Kali Linux. You have an alternative to Kali.
The question is, do we have an alternative to Kali? There is someone that did, I forgot the name of it. Someone did start putting together essentially a Kali, Athena?
OS, yeah.
Is it called Athena? Okay, yeah. Athena OS. So someone did put together like a port of a bunch of the similar sorts of tools and things, and almost all of them are there. I forgot how complete it was, but
I think it's a Nixpkgs overlay, so again, it can coexist with an existing NixOS installed just fine. Or, I mean, you can also install it on Kali.
Yeah. But yeah, so these ideas are good for if you're like you're doing some sort of thing. You want to make software that is kind of independent from the host. You don't want to necessarily have to live off the land. Sometimes you can if you need to, but sometimes you want to be able to like not interfere with what's out there. And so this provides you a way of doing that.
Nothing out there. That was great.
Cool.
Questions?
Yeah, let's open it up for questions. We already had one. Anyone burning to know anything about Nix, the ecosystem, the tool set, anything?
Yep.
Let's repeat the question.
Yeah. So the question is, like, what was the inflection point? There's a lot more recent interest right now, and where's the inflection point coming that like has caused that? I give my take on it is software has become more and more complex, and there's been far more interest in supply chain security, and people are kind of realizing that the like Docker container approach kind of just kicked the can down the road a little bit. So I think that inflection point actually got delayed because of the rise of containers, but it was on its way either way. And so now we have this like rising interest. We're starting to get back to the realm of software where we're gluing together lots of different systems. So now we're gluing together like agents. We're getting like ecosystems. They're like Python for this, but I'm using Go for my like systems deployment, and I've got like Rust stuff I need for my performance things. And how do I glue all this software together? How do I make it all work together? And then how do I do that in a way that is still trackable and manageable? How do I give people developer environments, for example, and make them work? I think all these things are driving more and more Nix interest, and we were kind of like sitting there ready to go, right, to give people the thing that they needed, even though they didn't know what it was called or like what it was, but a little bit of exposure, a little bit of understanding of how Nix works. All of a sudden, people kind of pattern match and like, yep, that's the thing I'm looking for. And I think that's led to a lot of that inflection point growth.
Yeah, I think the being burned by Docker for especially project builds.
Yeah.
There's probably some chart if you can like graph sentiment there. And
That was me.
I'm seeing still like many people interested in it coming from the personal projects, like local development thing. They never even make it past building their software that they're using. Let's say they're building project A. They never make it to the past where project A can build with Nix. They're just using Nix to pull in what they need, and then they build it the normal way they normally do. So they're not even going end to end with Nix. That is like exploded, and I think that continues to be the predominant way people are being like introduced and using Nix right now.
Yeah, we see a lot of interest and adoption right now on the NixOS side. So being able to like manage like your OS. Other one would be like Home Manager, people managing like dot files, configuring their like Vim RCs and NeoVim and such like that. People wanting to try out stuff. People want to try out things like Wayland and Sway and things like that. And we provide a kind of an easier, less damaging way to try stuff out. That's driven some interest. And then the developer experience as well of like, oh, well, I now need to orchestrate 10 different open source projects. Well, you know what? If 5 of them already have like some Nix files in there, I have a bit more confidence. I can actually go do some useful development and contribute usefully without like completely having my host be destroyed by some random script that they need.
And you need a starting mass. And I think pre-2015, they're just like Nix fundamentally worked, but had a lot of gaps. And you need it like there is a inflection point where the community is large enough, fixes enough of the other software. Like software has to be fixed to also work in the Nix paradigm. So if software has conventions where they're looking for default libraries or whatever, that stuff all has to be patched away. Like otherwise it doesn't work. So there is it's like the endless yak shape where you're getting things to work with Nix. And people don't want to go start using a technology if the first thing you have to do is start the yak shape themselves. They're like, I just want the largest package set and start installing things. And that's where we are today. So the community put in a lot of time to fix everything, to set up patterns. So all that stuff's mostly taken care of. And if it's not, there's like well-established paths on how to do that. When I joined, there was like some really rough edges and also some, like paper cuts that would get you, surprising paper cuts. And it's just like a nonstop grind to get those down, where now you have everything available. It works super smooth and it's highly reliable and reproducible. And yeah, so shout out to the community because we did that.
Speaking of which, anything on the roadmap?
Well, we got one more over here.
Yeah.
Let's do that. The question is, what is our workflow for contributing to Nix packages? I do a lot of reviews these days, so Nix packages review. There's a tool that basically does the workflow for you. It builds any of like the required downstream things for your thing, and makes it easy to like post results and merge them and stuff like that. If it's something more involved, let's say I'm working on like a NixOS module or something like that, then the story changes a little bit. But just for simple like package version bumps, Nix packages review is awesome.
I put stuff out there. If it gets merged, that's great. If it doesn't, I'll wait for DEF CON 34 and get Morgan to do it next year. Otherwise,
Merged four of them at lunch.
Yeah. Or tomorrow at noon, also get some stuff merged, but that's about it.
So
Good question.
if I hear the question right, it was about what's the plans on security? Yeah, so it's in reference to the XZ vulnerability. Actually, interestingly enough, we were not vulnerable to the XZ change due to some of these things. I mean, a piece of it is that the way we build our software kind of helps mitigate some of the supply chain problems. But another thing is that it just makes it also more visible. So visibility into potential problems is essentially the first step into security. Next steps for like ecosystem-wide security is stuff like, the SBOM things we talked about. It's about kind of, I want to get more funding into the like security team, have that be like a bit more of a robust thing. We have kind of new tools coming out to be able to track security vulnerabilities over time. The STF Sovereign Tech Fund is helping fund some of that stuff. We have other efforts like the Fixed Output Derivation Oracle, the FOD Oracle. That's doing things like making sure that upstream source dependencies don't change out from under us. So there's a lot of efforts that these core primitives allow us to do. And so honestly, we just need more people interested, more people who can kind of dedicate some time into productionizing these things and making them more robust. So I'd say a lot of great potential to make good security improvements. And we always need more help. So if anyone's interested with any of these things, please contact us and we'll kind of point you in the right direction.
But there's no way Nix solves the XZ supply chain like if you're taking in source and we still take in source and we build that source and that source has a backdoor that there's fundamentally nothing like goes away because you build it from source. So I like the idea of like it's oversight, it's visibility. You have a lot of active members looking at that source and highly cognizant of like what's going on their systems, and that level of like fidelity breeds that type of like introspection. But I don't want to sell like an overly secure posture here that like no way that could have happened to us. It is so easy to get things into like a lot of packages. I mean, and that was a highly sophisticated attack where the source was, like highly obfuscated, single maintainer, which we now know is like any package set. If you go, I bet if we audit it, this is just me putting my thumb in the air, like a double-digit amount of packages on Nix packages are single authored. So I think there's also like a reckoning of open source and understanding the type of source we take on and the risk tolerance that's there. So I think that's we've started attaching meta tags to. There isn't that sort of requirement now, but at least the packages, and you can audit your system, what type of provenance they have. So there's source, binary, there's like a handful of different types. I don't know if like, there could be a new meta tag that this source has all its commits GPG verified, right? Does that also solve the XZ? Again, no, like the author was probably signed their commits.
They were.
Yeah. But again, like the ability to specify that in a nodes, and it takes away some risk vectors, right? Anyone that sells you a solution that says it's all risk vectors gone has just meant you're running no software, which is also okay. Analog is great, and I love analog solutions, but it's a totally different problem set.
Although, honorable mention to NixOS's systemd unit hardening. There actually has been a lot of work into various people trying to lock down systemd units for running services, so they only have access to what they need to have access to. And I think there's a project out there that basically tries a bunch of the options with systemd unit hardening until the service stops breaking. So yeah.
Yep. Another question?
Why is everything systemd?
The question is, why is everything systemd? Because it works. Pragmatic. We could do something else, but at the moment, that's what was used. But if there's, I know there have been some efforts to try to make it a little bit more agnostic, so we can have non-systemd backends. I know that some people have also done using Nix to build non-NixOS OSs that don't use systemd, so that's also possible. But at the moment, the NixOS distribution is systemd based. Yes.
Yeah.
Anything on the roadmap?
Yeah, I actually wanted to mention something about, so on the steering committee, we're kind of working on a overall roadmap. And some of the theme of this thing, or the kind of the idea behind it, is to have like Nix everywhere, right? Or have featherweight Nix, or we're kind of figuring out what the messaging is. But the idea is kind of like the CTF question from before. Like, we want to be able to have Nix-based software run in as many different ways and contexts as possible. So this can mean stuff like, hey, let's get it working on Windows. Let's make it easier to work inside of Docker. Let's make it easier to work as a standalone tool. What if when you ran cargo build, what really happened is they called into a libnix library under the hood. The user has no idea this is going on, but other package managers are calling and using our sandboxing mechanisms, using our store mechanisms, our caching mechanisms, which are actually quite robust. And like those get used. Make it easier to just like grab a static binary and like use this in kind of other weird places and embedded devices. What if you're in medical hardware? What if you're going to be on a Raspberry Pi? These sorts of things. So basically, how can we get Nix used in as many contexts as possible? Because that's kind of also our strong suit, right? Once you start defining a package set, once you start defining derivations, being able to move them around to different architectures and OSs is one of our superpowers. And so if this kind of general theme or direction is of interest, or you got ideas on like where to take this or how to showcase this, we need some feedback. Let us know as to like, how will this kind of roadmap fit into either your interest or your plans? And contact us afterwards, or email, or just yell at me really loud. What's going on with Flakes? So flake stabilization is essentially the biggest hurdle there is fetch tree. Once we get fetch tree kind of like set to go, the big hurdle there is actually Git reproducibility. Git reproducibility with smudging and all sorts of kind of nuances with submodules and other like Git weirdnesses actually meant that things were not reproducible, even though you wanted them to be. With fetch tree stabilized, there aren't not too many hurdles to getting flakes stabilized. There's like some like command line stuff. There's a few little things with Airfreed's actually done a lot of work recently on that. Thank you very much. So it takes effort. Right now we don't have anyone full-time really working on it. So another thing that we need is just contribution. So if you're interested in developing Nix, any C++ experts out there? Woo! Okay, maybe not. But if you care enough to do some C++ work, again, please let me know. And that's another place where we could use some help.
Can I share some thoughts too, really quickly? I was a very long holdout for this thing called Flakes, extremely long. I feel like I just gave up and I was like, I'm going to use it. And I think there's validity in that because software is a community and it's written by authors. And the authors of this software suite have decided they like this thing and they want to keep pushing it forward. And I think there's some truth that as the authors and maintainers of that, they see a vision for where they want to go. And I was like, I've liked everything they've produced thus far, so I'm going to trust in the final vision. I still have a little hesitation, like I don't really know what it bought me, but that's where the ongoing investment's going, and and kind of mentioned that's where I'm spending my time to make it better and contribute to it. So that's like my also addendum to Flakes.
Actually, to the question from beforehand about the inflection point, I think Flakes actually were one of the reasons for growing interest, because they do make it a lot easier to like kind of have a personalized thing to reproduce it. It locks things down nicely and pins things. So I think if you look at a lot of the recent adoptees of Nix, they tend to be people who are far more coming at it from a Flake perspective. So I think that has also helped the inflection.
Flakes or the fancy CLI? It might have been the fancy CLI.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, we have 2 minutes. One last question.
Yes. Yeah, so the question is, you have DeadSys Nix that has kind of stepped ahead and done a lot more about like saying, hey, Flakes are stable and doing other things. But that's, there's the potential there of divergence from upstream. And then how do we deal with that? In some sense, the way I see that is, hey, they're testing the waters. So if they're testing the waters and they're kind of making sure that like that actually provides value, if they're going to run into problems perhaps sooner or run into some adoption issues in different ways, and that actually helps. So and a lot of the changes that DeadSys is doing is also being kind of PR'd back into upstream. Some are not. It depends on like what that actual change is. But I think overall, it just helps push us along. It's a forcing function, just like any other fork that would kind of, force us to get our act together. So I'm actually, in some sense, in favor of that. But you do have to be careful a little bit, and that's open source.
Okay, I think the community it solves itself. They're moving it forward. If it's a positive addition and it's pulling everyone there, that makes sense, and we're all going to use it. And if people don't want to pay for it, they'll probably clone it or like copy it and do the open source variant. If it's not a worthwhile addition and it's only useful to a subset of enterprise customers and not the like hundreds of thousands or whatever size of community that uses Nix, it probably won't be relied on as a feature in Nixpkgs. So, I kind of welcome capitalist markets to improve the state of Nix, and we'll kind of reap it back into the open source implementation of the best parts.
Thank you, guys.